So my name is Joanne McNair, and I am currently a pharmacy resident at Capital Health. I graduated this spring in 2012 from pharmacy at Dalhousie University. I have had a lot of experience with preceptors through our clinical rotations that we do all 4 years throughout school, and I've had the opportunity to work with some really great preceptors over the 4 years that I was there. So, relating to the role of a preceptor coming from a student's perspective, the role really changes depending on the year the student is in and what the outcomes of that particular clinical or rotation that they're in are. I think it's really moving now towards more of a guiding perspective, not so much a didactic sort of teaching way. It's more of helping the student to find how they learn, what their learning style is, and really finding out what type of a healthcare practitioner they're going to be and how they go about solving their own problems. So I think it's really about guidance and not so much the preceptor, kind of trying to shape the student into how they practice, but just allowing that student to become their own person and their own healthcare provider. So the most important attributes of a preceptor, I would have to say, would be, again, going back to the guidance, to allowing students to really, have a sense of independence when they're on rotations, and allowing them to think independently, and being able to balance that, watching over what your student is doing and being able to supervise, but doing it in a way that still allows the student to, not make mistakes, but figure things out for themselves. So I think that's a really important thing of a preceptor, being able to find that balance. Other attributes I think are really important are being able to recognize the learning style of the student that you have. So some students learn really well independently when they're able to look information up on their own. They learn through doing things on their own, where other students need that little bit of extra guidance. They like answers to questions right away. So I think it's important to dig a little bit deeper when you first meet your student and see what kind of learner they are, and really help to accentuate that learning style that they have, and so they can get the most out of their rotations. The last thing of an attribute for a preceptor would definitely be patience. Depending on the level of the learner that you have, it can really take some time for students to become comfortable in that new environment that they're in. They're still learning. So sometimes it can all be kind of overwhelming, and it's important for a preceptor to take the time to make sure the student is comfortable in that surrounding and that they know what's expected of them. And it can take a little bit at the beginning, but at the end, usually students, when we look back at the beginning of our rotations as compared to the end, we see a huge difference in ourselves, and I think that patience is really important from a preceptor. So I think, especially when it's a first rotation or a very new one, we all kind of have these expectations that it's going to be really scary, and we don't know anyone, we don't know where we are, we don't know what's expected of us, really. So I think the student kind of goes into it feeling at the beginning like they would really want someone to kind of guide them and make sure that they know what they're doing things properly. I think the biggest thing for students is that we can be really intimidated when we first walk into a practice site, especially where we're still learning. And I think it's really important for a preceptor to be able to make that student feel comfortable, and we kind of expect that we're going to be, especially in the first couple of days, that we're really going to be having someone there with us the whole time. So I think, again, important to gauge the type of learner that you have with you, but I think as a student, we kind of expect a preceptor to be there with us at all times, especially in the beginning of rotation. So I think that's important to kind of acknowledge and know that, we can't send our students out on their own really quickly right away, and that it's important to kind of get a feel for how your student feels. So I think some things I would mention would be that everything is changing now, and we're really pushing forward technology-wise in the world. And the way students in my and future generations were brought up in school, we looked everything up on the computer. We have tablets and iPhones and everything else that have all these programs on them that we don't reference books anymore. So when something needs to be looked at, we look it up online. We look it up on guidelines that we have on our iPad. So I think it's important to recognize that the learning styles are a little bit different now, and that may not be the way that you learned, or that may not be the way that you practice, but your student, that might be how they practice and they learn now. So I think it's really important to recognize that the styles may be different, and that your student may not be used to the way that you go about your everyday practice, but that's the way that we've been taught. So I think it's important to just acknowledge that sometimes there can be a gap there. The other thing is that I think you can learn a lot from your students. I know that during my clinical rotations, I'd always get, oh, I didn't know that, or oh, that's the most recent thing that has come out that maybe you didn't learn in school, or maybe you hadn't heard of yet. So I think it's very important to keep an open mind when you have a learner. That learner, doesn't know everything, but oftentimes they've heard what's most recent, and you can learn a lot from them too, which I think is important. So I would definitely consider being a preceptor after graduation. I think it's a great way, like I mentioned earlier, you learn a lot from your students. So I think it's a great way to kind of keep on top of information, and you're in a field where everyone is always learning. So I think it's a great opportunity, and I think you come from experience when you are a student and having the chance to work with so many great preceptors that you want to give back to your profession, and take students on and help guide the future of your profession, basically. So I think I will definitely take advantage of any opportunity I get to be a preceptor for students in the future.